All right, so this video right here is going to be for planer safety. This machine right here is a 12-inch planer. This is a 12-inch portable planer. There are several different types of planers. There are some that are portable like this that are on a tabletop that you can actually move around. And there are other ones that are standalone planers themselves, which are much bigger, 48, even up to like 8-foot planers in an industrial setting. So what this machine is used for is it will actually take the top surface of a piece of wood off and make it perfectly smooth and flat. Now, situations where you would need to do that is if you had a piece of wood that was rough cut from a lumber mill and it was 1 inch thick and you wanted that actually to be a finished size of 3/4, you could send it through this machine, adjust the height, and it would actually surface the top of that piece of wood off and give it a nice, smooth, clean finish. So the different parts of this machine, your table is right here. This is where you're going to lay the piece of wood and send the wood through the machine itself. When the wood feeds into the machine, there are actually little almost gripping type pulleys on the inside that will pull the piece of wood through for you into the blades. So when you're sending a piece of wood into a planer, you just get it started and then you can let the piece of material go and it will pull it through by itself and plane it down to the thickness that you have set. Once it starts to pull into the machine, it will actually hit a cutter head on the inside of the machine, which is basically a barrel with knives going around the barrel that will plane the material down. So to turn the machine on, your power button is here on the front. Your height adjustment is here on the right-hand side. Now, when I turn this crank, you can actually feed the machine up or down, depending on how thick you would like to cut your piece of material. Now, for safety for this machine, a couple of things you want to keep in mind. When you're sending a piece of wood through, you want to make sure that you stand out of the way of the back of the material being sent through the machine. There is a chance that this material could kick back from the blade and come flying out of the machine. Now, when that would happen, actually, what would be the problem there is if you hit a knot or a split in the piece of wood, sometimes it will rip off a chunk that is smaller than what you're cutting, and it actually grips the top and throws it out of the machine. So you want to avoid loose knots or splits in your wood too, if that's at all possible. This little gauge on the front here, the little toggle switch, when I set the machine on the one side, it'll pull the wood through quickly and give it a faster cut and cut down more material, whereas if I set it through slowly, it will give it a much smoother cut. So the final just adjustment on this machine is over here, and what that will do is that'll adjust the minimum thickness on what you're trying to cut on the machine. So if I set this to 1/8 of an inch, the planer will go no lower than 1/8 of an inch for a cut. There is a minimum thickness on a cut for this machine. You don't want to cut really, really thin with it because then you're going to run the risk of it splintering and ripping the piece of wood to shreds. What you want to do if you want to plane a really thin piece of wood is you have to make something called a backer board and put it underneath of that board and then attach that board to it when you send it through. So the only other thing here is to show you how to adjust the machine and get it ready to go. So I have a piece of material right here. This is pine, this is 2x. So a 2x is actually 1.5 inches thick. What I can do is set this on the first run for slightly smaller than 1.5 inches. You don't want to cut too much off with each pass. So we're probably going to cut off as much as the machine will let us. And in this situation, since it's pine and softwood, we can probably remove about 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch of material at a time. So when I'm ready to go, I test it by seeing to make sure that everything fits in the way it should. You don't want to have to shove the wood past any sort of a stopping point on here. You'll be able to tell that it kind of flows nicely into the machine. And the last thing you want to do is you can just turn the machine on and send the piece of wood through. Now, after I've sent the piece of wood through, you want to make sure that there's no debris laying on the table that could get further caught in the machine. You don't want any wood chips or chunks or anything like that. But one thing you want to keep in mind with that is if there is any debris laying on the table, you need to use a brush or something else to brush that machine off. Don't stick your hand anywhere near the front of this machine because there's always that chance that your hand could get pulled into the machine and that would be very dangerous. So the only other thing we need to do here is actually plane a piece of material and you can see what the results are. So this piece of wood is something that was just laying around as scrap. And you can see that there's some marks and stuff on the front of it. There's actually some things written on it. If I put this piece of material on the planer and send it through, it will be clean and flat on this side after I'm finished. So I turn the machine on and then I send it through. Another thing that happened with that last cut is I've actually taken a piece of wood that was warped, it was cupped, and it is now flat.